everyone. In this presentation I'm going to talk to you about human overpopulation and all the consequences and implications that come from it in 10 minutes. So let's jump right into it. Last year, 50 Nobel Prizes were asked what would be the greatest challenge for humanity in the coming years. 23% of them chose nuclear war. But the topic, and the most surprising one, was population rise and the degradation that comes from it in the environment. So let's see why the Nobel Prizes are so worried that this should be the greatest threat to our survival. If you were born in the last century, or your parents and grandparents, you know that the population achieved 2 billion by 1950. And it got to 1 billion after all humanity's story at the beginning of the 19th century, at around 1820. After that, the population kept on rising, and as you look at this graph, it almost exploded, and it's not stopping. By now you should be wondering that you've heard that population growth is slowing down, and that's true. Population growth got to its top value at 2.1 a few decades ago, and after that it continued to decrease. And that's something to be celebrated, because efforts are being made to reduce fertility and around the world, and that's paying off. But the challenge, and this is where people get it wrong, is that the population is not decreasing. It keeps on rising, and as we can see from the graph, the population keeps on going up, even if the growth rate is slowing down. It is now at 1.2 per year growth, and we are around 7.6 billion, which means that we will get to 8 billion around 2022. So this is the world fertility average around the globe. India will become the greatest country in the world with the most population, toppling China and achieving 1.7 billion people. But most of the population growth will be seen in Africa, where it is expected that around 2 billion people will be added to the planet in this century. What this means is that every person that is added to the planet has needs. They need houses, they need energy, they need food, they need transportation, they need fuel, now they need technology as well for survival and for status. This all has an impact, an ecological footprint. And now we will start by talking about the carbon footprint. As the world population kept on rising from 3 billion up, the atmospheric CO2, which is by parts per million, kept on rising as well. And from this graph you can see that there's almost a perfect correlation between population rising and CO2 in the atmosphere. So, as people come into the world, they have activities, they have needs, and these needs have a carbonic footprint. And as more people come into the world, more needs need to be met. So, CO2 is very important because it's a greenhouse gas. And as we know, it increases the global warming of the atmosphere. So we've all heard that the planet is warming up. And these anomalies that we can see here are a result of the CO2 that's present in the atmosphere. So population growth and population in general is a great contributor to the global warming problem that we have right now. So if we want to fix global warming and the climate change that it's provoking, we need to tackle population. And reducing our population and the consumption patterns that we have is our best option. So we've seen by now, I've presented you that the population growth increases climate disruption. But there's much more. There's also pollution that comes from mainly the technology that we have, and the acquisition of minerals and the energy that we need to sustain our various activities, even the TV that's running right now and the computer, they need energy. And this has a footprint. Everything that we do has a footprint. More than that, we have the ecosystem transformations that result from every of our activities. And I will try to explain some of them right now. So, as you can see from this picture, crowded locations for people, as I've told you before, they need housing. Each person that we add to the planet needs a home to live, a dignified life. And everyone has aspirations and ambitions in their life. So when we house people, be it the most poverty of them, this has impacts on the planet. As you can see, when we try to give housing to people, we are substituting what was in that location for something new. In this case, this location must have been a forest or a grassland. It doesn't matter which was. We can now know that looking at this, it's something new and it's replacing something else. This is a major contributor to the population problem, which is what we have to replace to add new conditions for humans. The second part, and a very important one, is what we all need to eat. Agricultural fields and all we need to create to feed humanity has impacts as well. And this is not just from the pollution from pesticides and fertilizers, but what you can see here are monocultures. This is substituting something that was in that place before. And if we have an ever-increasing population, that population needs to be fed. And this means that forest areas or areas that are not right now suited for agriculture will be replaced for fields for agriculture because the population is rising and we need to be fed. This also increases the rate of extinction rates of wildlife that we are seeing right now as we enter the Anthropocene. Another factor is the energy that all humanity requires for all the activities that we have and the technology that we devour right now. So from plastics, from clothing, from the agriculture that we've shown before, all that requires energy. And humanity depends on it deeply. Even if we have a very an ecological footprint that is very low, we still have a footprint of some kind. It's impossible to not have some kind of impact on the environment. But we must recognize that some people have more than others. That's the greatest difference from the developing countries to the developed nations. Developed nations have the greatest consumption rates, but the developing nations have more people, and they are creating more people that want to have the consumption of the developed nations. And this is something that we have to grapple, and this is a reality, and is a major topic of interest in the population debate. Another thing is the grazing and the industrial agriculture and the livestock farming that humanity has depended on, and the love for meat that we are so dependent right now. It's another factor for a lot of damage in the ecosystems because these animals need to be fed, and most of this feeding comes from crops that, as before, are not all for humanity but are also for these animals. And when we look at these animals, they are a major threat for wildlife because they substitute ecosystems that are now used to feed and house these animals. Finally, the residues and the waste that humanity creates. It's impossible not to include this because every one of us creates some kind of impact and waste from all of our activities. That as well is a thing that we must discuss. And now I will open it for questions. Thank you.